This is, believe it or not, me and Ursula K. Le Guin doing a public event in Portland, Oregon, during which it was revealed that what Ursula K. Le Guin meant by speculative fiction. What I meant by speculative fiction, she uses the word science fiction for, and what I use the word science fiction for, she would call fantasy. We both recognize that there's a difference between books that talk about things that really could happen and books that talk about things that really could not happen. This is the cover of In Other Worlds, and in truly modern form. I got this cover through Twitter. One of my Twitter followers sent me a URL with the note, Margaret Atwood would like these pictures. And so I opened it up, and I did like the pictures. There were 8 of them. You can go on the website yourself if you, I think it's cited on the book cover. These are artists who do manipulated photographs. And I sent them to my publisher, and they liked them too. This one is the Don't Worry, Be Happy one. If you look at the small print on the shoulders, that's what it says. Don't worry, be happy. You can see she has a lot of pills. And those things in the background are opium poppies. And this is the English version of the same cover, except it's the full fold-out. Back to my childhood. This is 1947 in the northern woods of Quebec. This is the insect lab that my father worked in which he in fact built himself. It was in the woods, it was on a very large lake. There was no road leading to it, and some of my mother's friends thought that she was quite crazy to take small children up there with no telephone, no doctor, and no town, and basically no people. But having been a tomboy, it suited her just fine. That is my mother fishing. That's my brother that she's holding while sitting in the boat. That box beside the boat is where they used to put him. It's essentially a cheese box. And cover it with cheesecloths to keep out the black flies and mosquitoes. And here we are in about 1941. You can see I have been born. That's me in the snowsuit. And what we're doing is, this would be April, we're going down a frozen lake on a sledge drawn by horses. That's my mom sitting in the middle, my brother is opposite. We skip a bit ahead a bit further. There was no electricity here, there was no running water. The heating was by wood and all the cooking was done on a wood stove. And the reason we don't have shoes is not that our parents were negligent. It's that we would go up there in April and we would be there until November and our feet grew. There were no shoe stores. Sometimes I inherited my brother's clothes and sometimes I didn't. When you were ill in those days, you were not put in front of a television set. You were given old magazines, some scissors, and some pages of mucilage. I was always very interested in that word, mucilage, and a scrapbook. And this is indeed one of my very own wartime scrapbooks, which may explain why we all took so easily to Marshall McLuhan when he came along. We were already interested in advertising because the things that you cut out of the magazines were the things that interested you the most, and those were always the pictures. And the best pictures were in ads. What can I say? So still a lot of care is lavished on those. This is my first published book. It is Blue Bunny Comics. You can see one of them is blue, the other one is not. I like being accurate even then. We sewed our books together with string. Because my parents went through the Depression, they saved everything, so we always had these big balls of string that they had saved. String, rubber bands, tin foil. Here is one of the balloon pictures. You can see they have many balloons. There are the rabbits in the balloon levitated vehicles. And here they are, several action pictures. Up at the top of the one called Steele and Dottie, you can see that it's a very cunning, almost Bruegel-like composition, in which the central characters doing the action are actually quite far away. They're up in the sky there with the lines denoting twirling motions. And in the one called War in Mischief Land, you can see that they all seem quite pleased with the whole affair. And the bullets, note especially the bullet at the bottom one, it is traveling visibly through the air with a little flight path of its own. My brother did much more amazing war pictures, so I was imitating him. We were hunter-gatherers. There was some of the stuff that we gathered. It was a place with many blueberries. And that kind of life came in very useful later when describing the gardeners in the year of the flood. We were interested then, as kids are increasingly now, in mythological beings. And you can see that there's a blend of Greek ones and I don't know what you would call them. I think the female one with the wand is possibly a princess, but might possibly be an angel. The one with the wings is definitely got flying powers, but also seems to be involved in a war. These were drawn by my brother. I think they were part of a game. You can see that he's got the initials, and we've cut one of them out. I think the idea was that we were going to cut them out and use them as cards. The one flying with the little bow and arrow was a Cupid person. And when we weren't doing that, we were paying a lot of attention to fish. So there was no grocery store, so it was hunting, gathering, fishing, and growing your own vegetables in sand. Here is a balloon picture. You can see the levitated pets. And this is I don't know actually what that is. I think it's a combination. I think it's probably a fairy. That would be my guess. I don't know whether that's a cloak or whether it is a butterfly wing. I'm sorry, but I have repressed. And when we weren't doing that, we were involved with aliens. Here are some pictures from my brother's extensive oeuvre. He's got some very good advice. Introduction, it says, "This story is not true." Of course, there is a planet called Neptune, but its inhabitation is unknown. I have made up a number of things that will be used in the next 2 moments. I think that's very honest. It's right out there. There was a great deal of emphasis on war. It was the war years. We were very conscious of them. And my brother used to routinely trade his pink, silver, and gold pencils, which I coveted, for my yellow, orange, and red ones, which he used up to make explosions. Yet more war. He produced actually a very large and very illustrated group of books, complete with maps. This is a map of Neptune. You note he finessed the mountains by saying there are no mountains on Neptune. And he then moved into what he was later to pursue. He moved into the biology of aliens. And he started drawing their circulatory systems and their skeletons and their nervous structures. And he did that not only for the humanoids on other planets, but he did it for all of the vegetable life and insect life and animal life on these planets that he was inventing. I, on the other hand, was wandering off into Gothic forms. This was my first play. You can see it's not about Mr. and Mrs. Brown. And I performed it. Those little strings are the little strings I was controlling these puppets with. I put it on in a cardboard box and got my first bad review. It's from my brother and his friends. And, I'm sorry to say I laughed at it. But, you know, once you've gone through that, you're kind of ready. The writing life. This is 1953. It's the interior of one of the houses that my father would build. This one is made of upright logs. And that's my, by then, much younger sister. There's my brother in the background, and there's the kerosene lamp. And what I'm doing is drawing for her. Then I got as far as high school. This is Niagara Falls. You can see I'm already starting to look quite serious. Getting that writerly look. And here are some of the things that I was reading in the cellar when I should have been doing my homework. Brave New World, an early read. Trashy magazines. Weird Tales was a pulp, and it published a lot of the writers that later became quite well known in SF circles. Sometimes people say to me, well, why did the genre get a trashy reputation? And I say, have you ever seen the covers of Weird Tales? These kinds of covers were in fact painted by a female artist. And I have a piece in the current Playboy magazine concerning these covers. This is my original paperback, 1984, from the early 50s. I still have it. I must have read it when it came out in paperback form shortly after it was published. So it made quite an impression on me, and so did a similar book called Darkness at Noon, which was not speculative fiction. It was an account of what was going on during Stalin's purges, and it was very similar, because that, of course, is what George Orwell based 1984 on. Then we got to 1961. Coffee houses had appeared. That's me in the middle distance. And in the foreground is Sylvia Tyson singing folk songs. Later became Ian and Sylvia. And that was where we would read our poetry in a condemned warehouse regularly raided by the fire department, which had a washroom that opened out onto this main room, and the first espresso machine anybody had ever seen. So you'd be in the middle of your most plangent, heart-rendering line. Somebody would flush the toilet and open the door, or turn on the espresso machine. So you would be reading, and then my heart, again, it was like my brother's bad review. This is my first book, which I hand-set myself on a flatbed press, and did the cover with a lino block. And I was very interested to see in the collection of the British Library some fanzines, some SF fanzines of the period, which were very similar in feel. They were handmade. People turned them out on Mimeo machines or other forms of duplication. They were usually stapled together, and they had a collage effect. People glued things into them. This is my first writer's jacket photo. You can see it looks like a poet. But my second jacket photo was for a novel. A somewhat funny novel. And that is my Sally Ann fur coat in Edmonton, $25. Here's my first novel's cover, quite a non-naturalistic one. And then my moment of hair arrived. Up until this time, I'd been struggling with Twiggy, which decreed that you should have very straight hair. But there was a brief moment when the ethnic look came in, and I didn't have to struggle with big brush bristle rollers and something called dippity-doo. I just unhindered. My first novel was published in 1972, but at the same time I was continuing to draw and paint. And these are the kinds of things that were going on in my drawing and painting life. This is the home life of the harpy. Harpies did have upper bodies of women and lower bodies of birds, so it stands to reason that they would lay eggs and have young harpies come out of them. And just to balance off the genders. We'll skip to 1984. This is a picture of me actually writing The Handmaid's Tale in that year in an apartment in Berlin, which was still surrounded with the Berlin Wall. I began that novel in Berlin. I finished it in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is a bookend of a different kind. So in between those two kinds of bookends, I composed that novel. I'm writing it on a German typewriter with a German keyboard, easy for me to do because I never learned to touch type. And the reason I never learned to touch type is that I unfortunately did not take what I should have, which was called secretarial sciences. Instead I took home economics, which means that I can sit in your zipper, no problem. But I have to look at the keyboard. So when the keyboard changes from one language to another, it's easier for me. This is the first cover of the picture is the first picture of The Handmaid's Tale, and this is a still from the movie. Natasha Richardson was the heroine. We skip a lot of time, right up until the present time. We did some pictures inside the e-book of In Other Worlds, and some of those are illustrations from The Blind Assassin. Here's the Lizard Man, and here's one of the Peach Women. And finally, we revert to Twitter. I saw a couple of people on Twitter who were Comic Con aficionados, and they had pseudonyms, and one of them was called Kidney Boy. So I asked Kidney Boy if he would like me to do an outfit for him, and he would like that. And I said, what sort of outfit would you like? Well, it turned out that he was a nephrologist, and that is a kidney doctor, and I said, what sort of superpower would you like? And he said, well, I would like the superpower of being able to insert kidneys into my patients instantly and without pain. So that's Kidney Boy. He's carrying his magic scalpel. On his head is a magic kidney hat. He's got some flying kidney helpers and a big K on the front. And this is his... He said he also wanted the flying around thing, if he could have it. So I gave him a cape, and he is holding a bottle of blood, as you can see. So by day he's a lowly nephrologist, by night he's Kidney Boy, flying in to insert the kidneys. And his friend was called Dr. Snit, and she too wanted an outfit. So I asked her what outfit she wanted. And it turned out that she was a chronic pain sufferer. So she wanted the ability to overcome chronic pain, not only in herself, but in other people. And she gets a magic word called no paino, and she has a wand which is composed of a circlet of Tylenols. And that is her enemy that she is trampling underfoot. So I did revert to my comic book, and I have drawn comic strips. In fact, I drew one in the 70s, and then I drew one sporadically called Book Tour Comics, which I sent to my publishers to make them feel guilty. And unfortunately, in our household, these tendencies break out spontaneously. This is my Easter egg. And sometimes we get scenes like this. So that brings me to the end of my PowerPoint. You can now spot some of the familiar things in the end papers. You can see the fairy flying around with the wand. You can spot the two flying rabbits, one with bars, one with dots. You can see the people devouring vegetables. And you can see the Weird Tales girl on the cushion with the copper brassiere, and many others. A couple of spaceships, a rocket, some planets, everything you might need. From Ursula K. Le Guin's a long review article of the birthday of the world. Science fiction is the box in which her work is usually placed, but it's an awkward box. It bulges with discards from elsewhere. Into it have been crammed all those stories that don't fit comfortably into the family room of the socially realistic novel or the more formal parlor of historical fiction or other compartmentalized genres. Westerns, Gothics, horrors, Gothic romances, and the novels of war, crime, and spies. Its subdivisions include science fiction proper, gizmo-riddled and theory-based, space travel, time travel, or cyber travel to other worlds with aliens frequent. Science fiction fantasy, dragons are common, the gizmos are less plausible and may include wands, and speculative fiction, human society and its possible future forms, which are either much better than what we have now or much worse. However, the membrane separating these subdivisions are permeable, and osmotic flow from one to another is the norm. It's too bad that one term, science fiction, has served for so many variants. And too bad also that this term has acquired a dubious, if not downright sluttish, reputation. True, the proliferation of sci-fi in the 1920s and 1930s gave rise to a great many bug-eyed, monster-bestrewn space opera, followed by films and television shows that drew heavily on this odoriferous cache. In brilliant hands, however, the form can be brilliant. Which brings us to Ursula K. Le Guin. No question about her literary quality. Her graceful prose, carefully thought through premises, psychological insight, and intelligent perceptions have earned her the National Book Award, the Kafka Award, 5 Hugos, 5 Nebulas, a Newbery, a Jupiter, a Gandalf, and an armful of other awards, great and small. Her first 2 books, Planet of Exile and Rocannon's World, were published in 1966, and since then she has published 16 novels as well as 10 collections of stories. Collectively, these books have created 2 major parallel universes. The universe of the Ecumen, which is sci-fi proper, spaceships, travel among worlds, and so forth, and the world of Earth-Sea. The latter must be called fantasy, I suppose, as it contains dragons and witches, and even a school for wizards, though this institution is a long way from the Hogwarts of Harry Potter. The Ecumen series may be said very broadly to concern itself with the nature of human nature. How far can we stretch and still remain human? What is essential to our being, and what is contingent? The Earthsea series is occupied, again very broadly speaking, with the nature of reality and the necessity of mortality, and also with language in relation to its matrix. That's heavy weather to make of a series that has been promoted as suitable for age 12, but perhaps the fault lies in the marketing directors. Like Alice in Wonderland, these tales speak to readers on many levels. Le Guin's preoccupations are not divided into 2 strictly separate packages, of course, Both of her worlds are scrupulously attentive to the uses and misuses of language. Both have their characters fret over social gaps and get snarled up in foreign customs. Both worry about death. But in the Ecumen universe, although there is much strangeness, there is no magic, apart from the magic inherent in creation itself. The astonishing thing about Le Guin as a writer is that she managed to create these two realms, not only in parallel, but at the same time. The first Earthsea book, A Wizard of Earthsea, appeared in 1968, and The Left Hand of Darkness, the famous classic from the Ecumen series, in 1969. Either one would have been sufficient to establish Le Guin's reputation as a mistress of its genre. Both together make one suspect arcane drugs, or creative double-jointedness, or ambidexterity. Not for nothing did Le Guin invoke handedness in her fourth title. As soon as we start talking about the left hand, all sorts of biblical connotations gather. Although the left hand is the sinister one, God too has a left hand. So left hands can't be all bad. Should your right hand know what your left hand is doing? And if not, why not? And so forth. As Walter Benjamin once said, the decisive blows are struck left-handed. Thank you.